After 7 years of being ignored, Clara Bennett learned how to become invisible. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic, heartbreaking moment where the rain poured down outside and somebody slammed a door. It happened quietly. It happened in the little spaces between conversations that never started. In the dinners she cooked that went cold before her husband came home. In the texts that stayed unread for hours, then answered with one word. In the birthdays he forgot, then remembered only because his assistant sent flowers with his name, printed neatly on a card. It happened every time Clara looked across the room at Daniel and realized he had not truly looked back at her in years. And the strangest part was this. From the outside, everyone thought Clara had a perfect life. She lived in a beautiful house on the edge of Willow Creek, the kind of house people slowed down to admire when they drove by. It had white shutters, a stone path, and climbing roses that Clara trimmed every spring with careful hands. The porch lights glowed warm at night. The curtains were always clean. The garden never had weeds. Her husband, Daniel Bennett, was respected in town. He owned Bennett Development, a growing construction and real estate company his father had started and Daniel had expanded. He wore tailored suits, shook hands firmly, donated to charity dinners, and smiled politely for photographs. People said Clara was lucky. They said she must be proud. They said Daniel was the kind of man who worked hard so his wife could have everything. And Clara always smiled. Because how do you explain loneliness to people who only see the house? How do you tell them that a large home can feel like an empty train station when the person you love walks through it without noticing you? How do you explain that having everything does not matter when you feel like nothing? Clara used to be different. Before the silence settled over her life, she laughed easily. She sang while washing dishes. She believed in handwritten notes, slow Sunday breakfasts, and dancing in the kitchen for no reason. When she met Daniel, she was 26 and working at a small design studio downtown. He came in one afternoon looking for someone to help redesign his company's office lobby. He was confident, serious, and handsome in a way that made people turn twice. But Clara remembered something different. He was kind. That was what won her. Not his money, not his ambition, not the expensive watch on his wrist. It was the way he listened. The first time they met, he asked her what she thought of the building before telling her what he wanted. Clara gave him an honest answer. She told him the lobby looked impressive but cold, like it was trying too hard to intimidate people. Daniel stared at her for a moment, then laughed. A real laugh. He said, "Nobody has ever said that to me before." Clara smiled and said, "Maybe nobody wanted to lose your business." He hired her that same day. For 3 months they worked together on the redesign. He stopped by more often than necessary. She noticed. He noticed that she noticed. He brought coffee in the mornings. She pretended not to know he had asked her coworker how she took it. He asked about her sketches. She asked about his dreams. He told her he wanted to build something that would outlast him. She told him a building only mattered if people felt welcome inside it. He said, "You make everything softer." She said, "Maybe you need softer." They married 18 months later under a big oak tree behind her parents' old farmhouse. Daniel cried when he saw her walking down the aisle. Clara teased him about it afterward, but secretly she carried that memory like a treasure. For the first year, they were happy. Not perfect happy. Daniel worked long hours even then, but he came home with stories. He called her from job sites. He left notes on the refrigerator. One morning, Clara found a sticky note on the coffee maker. "I love you more than coffee, but please don't make me prove it." She laughed so hard she kept the note. It was still tucked inside an old cookbook years later, faded at the edges. Back then, when Daniel came home late, he would find her half asleep on the couch and kiss her forehead. Back then, he noticed when she cut her hair. Back then, he reached for her hand in public. Back then, he said her name like it meant home. Then his father died. And grief changed Daniel. At first, Clara understood. Richard Bennett's death had been sudden, a heart attack in the middle of a Monday meeting. Daniel was only 32 when he inherited the full weight of the company. Employees depended on him. Projects depended on him. His mother, Elaine, depended on him too, though she showed it by criticizing every decision he made. Daniel buried himself in work. Clara did what love does in the beginning. She made excuses. He's grieving. He's under pressure. He needs time. She cooked meals and packed them in containers because he forgot to eat. She sat with Elaine during doctor appointments. She answered condolence cards, organized files, hosted relatives, and held Daniel when he finally broke down in the shower 2 weeks after the funeral. He cried into her shoulder and whispered, "I don't know how to do this." Clara held him tighter and said, "You don't have to do it alone." But somewhere along the way, Daniel stopped hearing that. The company grew. His silence grew with it. 1 year became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became 7. And Clara slowly became a wife in name, a helper in practice, and a ghost in her own marriage. She learned Daniel's schedule from his assistant instead of from him. She learned about his business trips from credit card alerts. She learned about his bad days from the tension in his jaw, because he no longer told her what was wrong. At dinner, he checked emails. In bed, he turned away. At parties, he stood beside her like she was part of his image, not part of his heart. And every time Clara tried to talk, Daniel had a reason not to. "Not tonight, Clara, I'm tired." "Can this wait? You're making a big deal out of nothing." "I work for us. You know how busy I am. You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under." Eventually, Clara stopped trying to explain her loneliness. She became efficient instead. She managed the house. She attended events. She smiled beside him. She remembered his mother's birthday, his board meetings, his dry cleaning, his favorite brand of tea, his allergies, his passwords, and the names of clients' spouses. She remembered everything. Daniel remembered almost nothing. On their 7th wedding anniversary, Clara woke before sunrise. For a moment, she lay still under the pale morning light and listened to the house. It was quiet. Daniel was beside her, asleep, one arm outside the blanket, phone still resting on the nightstand where he had dropped it after answering messages past midnight. Clara turned her head and looked at him. Even tired, Daniel was still handsome. His dark hair had a few silver threads now. Fine lines had appeared near his eyes. He looked older than he had when they married, but not in a bad way. Clara wondered if he would remember. She did not expect diamonds. She did not need flowers. She did not want an expensive dinner where he spent half the night looking at his screen. She wanted one sentence. "Happy anniversary, Clara." That was all. One sentence to prove she still existed somewhere in his mind. She got out of bed quietly and went downstairs. In the kitchen, she made coffee. She set out 2 mugs, though Daniel usually left with only half a cup and no goodbye. Then she opened the old cookbook where she kept memories. The sticky note was still there. "I love you more than coffee, but please don't make me prove it." Clara touched it gently. Then she closed the book. Daniel came downstairs at 7:15, already on a call. He walked into the kitchen, kissed the air near her cheek without really touching her, grabbed his mug, and turned toward the hallway. Clara said, "Daniel." He covered the phone. "What?" She waited. His eyes flicked to his watch. She almost told him. She almost handed him the day like a reminder. But something inside her was tired of begging to be remembered. So she only said, "Will you be home for dinner?" He frowned slightly, distracted. "Probably not. Big meeting tonight, don't wait up." Then he uncovered the phone and walked out. The front door closed. Clara stood in the kitchen with 2 mugs on the counter and sunlight pooling across the floor. Her anniversary began with silence. By noon, a delivery arrived. For one brief, foolish second, Clara's heart lifted. Maybe he remembered. The delivery man handed her a long white box tied with a silver ribbon. "Mrs. Bennett." "Yes." "Sign here." She signed. Her hands trembled as she set the box on the kitchen island. Inside were 12 white roses and a card. To my beautiful wife, happy anniversary. Love, Daniel. Clara stared at the card. The words were correct, but they were printed, not written. She knew immediately his assistant had arranged it. The same assistant who sent his mother orchids every November. The same assistant who booked client gifts and charity tables. Clara sat down slowly. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Maybe tears required surprise. And she was no longer surprised. That evening, Clara cooked anyway. Not because she believed Daniel would come home. Because she wanted to say goodbye to the woman who still hoped he might. She made his favorite meal from the early days: roasted chicken with lemon and thyme, garlic mashed potatoes, and green beans with almonds. She set the dining table with the blue plates they had bought on their honeymoon. She lit 2 candles. Then she sat alone and waited. At 8, the food was warm. At 9, it was cold. At 10:30, Daniel texted. Meeting ran late, don't wait up. Clara looked at the message for a long time. Then she typed, happy anniversary. She stared at the words. Then she deleted them. Instead, she turned off the candles, wrapped the food, cleaned the kitchen, and went upstairs. Daniel came home after midnight. Clara was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed in her robe. He entered quietly, loosened his tie, and looked surprised to see her. You're still up. And yes. He sighed. Clara, I told you not to wait. I know. He tossed his tie onto a chair. Then, why are you looking at me like that? She studied his face, searching for recognition. Nothing. Not even a flicker. She said softly, do you know what today is? Daniel rubbed his forehead. Thursday. Something in Clara's chest went very still. She nodded once. Yes, she said, Thursday. He frowned. What's wrong? As she stood. Nothing. Clara. She walked toward the bathroom. Don't do this, he said. I'm exhausted. She turned back. And for the first time in years, she did not soften her voice to protect him. So am I. Daniel blinked. Clara closed the bathroom door before he could answer. That night, she did not sleep. Daniel did. His breathing became slow and steady while Clara lay beside him, staring at the ceiling. At 3 a.m, she understood something so clearly that it frightened her. She had spent 7 years waiting for Daniel to come back. But what if he was not lost? What if this was who he had chosen to become? What if the man who loved her more than coffee had disappeared because he no longer wanted to fight for that version of himself? And what if Clara had disappeared too, while waiting for him? By morning, she had made a decision. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. She would leave. Not to punish him. Not to make him chase her. Not to teach him a lesson. She would leave because staying had become a slow kind of dying, and Clara Bennett wanted to live again. For the next 2 weeks, she moved quietly. That was the thing about being ignored for so long. Nobody noticed when she began to disappear. She opened a separate bank account with the savings from her freelance design work. Daniel had forgotten she still took small projects now and then. He had once loved her creativity. Later, he treated it like a hobby. She contacted a lawyer named Mara Ellis, a calm woman with silver glasses and kind eyes, who listened without interrupting. Are you in danger? Mara asked gently. Clara shook her head. No, just alone. Mara nodded like she understood that loneliness could be its own emergency. They discussed separation papers. Clara did not ask for revenge. She did not want half the company. She did not want a fight. She wanted enough to start over, and she wanted her name back from the life that had swallowed it. She rented a small cottage 2 towns over near Lake Marin. It had peeling paint, a tiny kitchen, and windows that looked out toward pine trees. It was nothing like the Bennett house. That was why she loved it. She bought secondhand furniture, a yellow armchair, a small wooden table, a bed frame with scratches on one side, blue curtains, a kettle that whistled. Piece by piece, she built a place where no one's silence could fill every room. She packed slowly when Daniel was at work. Not everything, just what was hers. Clothes, sketchbooks, a box of letters from her parents, her grandmother's necklace, a few books, the old cookbook. She almost left the sticky note behind. Then she took it. Not because she wanted Daniel back. Because she wanted proof that she had not imagined being loved once. On the last Friday of September, Clara stood in the bedroom she had shared with Daniel for 7 years and looked around. The room was spotless. His suits hung on one side of the closet. Her side was nearly empty. He had not noticed. That almost made her laugh. Instead, she placed a sealed envelope on his pillow. Inside were the separation papers and a handwritten letter. She had rewritten the letter 6 times. The final version was short. Daniel, I have spent years trying to reach you, but I cannot keep calling into a room where no one answers. I loved you, I waited for you, I forgave more silence than I knew a person could survive. But I am not invisible, and I cannot stay where I am unseen. I am leaving. Please speak with my lawyer about the separation. I hope one day you find peace. Clara. She did not write goodbye. Goodbye felt too small. At 5:30, Clara carried her last suitcase downstairs. The house glowed in the soft evening light. For years, she had kept it beautiful. She had polished the floors, chosen the curtains, planted the roses, warmed every room. But now, standing in the foyer, she understood that a house could hold memories without being home. She set her keys on the entry table. For a moment, her fingers lingered there. Then she walked out. Outside, the air smelled like rain. Clara loaded the suitcase into her car, got behind the wheel, and looked once at the house. The porch light flickered on automatically. For 7 years, she had left that light on for Daniel. Tonight, she left it for herself. Then she drove away. Daniel noticed at 9:42 that night. Not because the house was empty. Not because her side of the closet was bare. Not because the kitchen lights were off or dinner was not waiting. He noticed because he could not find his blue presentation folder. He came home irritated, phone pressed between his shoulder and ear, still arguing with a contractor about permits. He dropped his keys in the bowl, walked into the kitchen, and opened the refrigerator. No dinner containers. He frowned. The house was unusually quiet. Clara, he called, more out of habit than concern. No answer. He ended the call and went upstairs, muttering about the folder. The bedroom was dim. He turned on the light. At first, he saw the envelope. Then he saw the closet. Empty hangers. Empty shelves. The small framed photo from her nightstand was gone. Daniel stood very still. For several seconds, his mind refused to understand what his eyes were telling him. Then he picked up the envelope. His name was written on it in Clara's handwriting. Not Clara's quick grocery list handwriting, her careful handwriting. The kind she used when something mattered. He opened it. He read the legal papers first because his brain clung to anything official. Separation. Petition. Attorney. Terms. His pulse began to pound. Then he unfolded the letter. He read it once. Then again. Then a third time. But the words would not change. I am not invisible. Daniel sat down on the bed. The room felt suddenly enormous. He looked toward the bathroom door, half expecting Clara to come out and say this had gone too far, that she was upset but still here, that they could talk tomorrow. But the bathroom was empty. The house was empty. And for the first time in years, Daniel heard the silence. Not the comfortable quiet of a home at night, A hollow silence. A silence with Clara removed from it. He called her. Straight to voicemail. He called again. Straight to voicemail. He texted. Where are you? No answer. Clara, call me. No answer. This isn't funny. No answer. He stared at that message and immediately felt ashamed. Funny? Did he think she was playing? He deleted nothing, the message had already gone. He called again. Then he called her friend Sophie. Sophie answered on the fourth ring. Daniel. Her tone told him she knew. Where is she? I'm not going to tell you that. Panic sharpened his voice. Sophie, this is my wife. There was a pause. Then Sophie said quietly, you should have remembered that sooner. The line went dead. Daniel stood in the bedroom, phone in hand, anger rising because anger was easier than fear. How could Clara do this? Leave without a conversation. Without warning. But even as the thought formed, memories came behind it. Clara standing in the kitchen, asking if he would be home. Clara sitting across from him at dinner while he answered emails. Clara saying, I miss you, and him saying, I'm right here. Clara asking, do you still love me? And him laughing tiredly because he thought the answer was obvious. Clara waiting up on their anniversary. Do you know what today is? Thursday. Daniel closed his eyes. Oh God, he whispered. The anniversary. He had forgotten. Not just dinner. Not just a gift. He had forgotten the day they promised each other forever. He sat on the floor beside the bed and pressed both hands over his face. For years, Daniel had believed Clara would always be there. Like the house. Like the porch light. Like morning coffee. Like something guaranteed by routine. He had mistaken her patience for permanence. Now she was gone. And the house, for all its beauty, felt like a building after everyone had moved out. Clara's first night in the cottage was not peaceful. It was strange. The rooms creaked, the heater clicked, rain tapped against the windows, the bed smelled like new sheets and unfamiliar wood. She cried only once. Not when she unpacked. Not when she ate toast for dinner standing at the kitchen counter. Not when Daniel called again and again until she turned off her phone. She cried when she opened the old cookbook and the sticky note fell out. I love you more than coffee. Clara sat on the floor surrounded by half-open boxes and held the note in both hands. She did not cry for the man Daniel had become. She cried for the woman she had been. The woman who believed love, once given, would be cared for. The woman who waited. The woman who made excuses until she ran out of herself. By morning, her eyes were swollen, but she felt lighter. Not happy. Not yet. But lighter. She made coffee in the whistling kettle. It tasted too strong. She drank it anyway on the back step while fog lifted from the lake. There was no one to ignore her. No one to disappoint her. No one to make her feel foolish for hoping. For the first time in years, the day belonged entirely to her. She started small. She painted the kitchen wall pale yellow. She walked around the lake every morning. She reopened her design portfolio and created a website under her own name, Clara Bennett Interiors. Then, after staring at it for an hour, she changed it to Clara Hayes Interiors. Hayes was her mother's maiden name. The first time she saw it typed at the top of the page, she smiled. She took on a project redesigning a local bakery, then a bookstore, then a lakeside in whose owner wanted the lobby to feel like a hug with windows. Clara laughed when she read that email. I can do that, she whispered. And she did. Her work changed. Before, she had designed spaces to please clients. Now, she designed spaces that made people feel less alone. Warm lighting, soft corners, places to sit, small details that said you belong here. People noticed. Within 3 months, Clara's name began traveling by word of mouth. The bakery owner told everyone she had saved their business because customers stayed longer. The bookstore posted photos online. The Lakeside Inn received more bookings after guests complimented the lobby. Clara was not rich, she was not famous, but she was becoming herself again. And every step she took away from Daniel made the old life feel less like a wound and more like a lesson. Daniel, on the other hand, began falling apart in ways nobody noticed at first. He went to work, he attended meetings, he answered emails. But something had shifted. He missed details. He snapped at employees. He stared too long at empty spaces. His assistant, Marcy, placed a cup of coffee on his desk one morning and said, "You already asked me for the Henderson file 3 times. Daniel looked up, "Did I?" Her expression softened. "Have you spoken to Clara?" He looked away. Marcy sighed, "Daniel. Don't. She handled more than you realized." I said don't. But after she left, he opened the Henderson file and realized Clara's handwriting was on a sticky note attached to the front. "Ask about permit delay before signing." He frowned. He remembered that meeting. Clara had reminded him over breakfast. He had barely listened. The permit delay would have cost them thousands if she had not caught it. He opened another file. More notes. Client's wife recovering from surgery, send flowers. Elaine's medication, refill due Friday. Charity dinner seating chart revised. Daniel sat back slowly. Clara had been everywhere. In every smooth event. Every remembered birthday. Every softened business relationship. Every quiet correction. She had been the invisible architecture holding his life together. And he had called her dramatic. That evening, he went home and walked through the house room by room. For the first time, he noticed what was missing. Not just her belongings. Her presence. The throw blanket she always folded over the couch. The lavender soap by the sink. The small vase of wildflowers on the kitchen windowsill. The music she played while cooking. The warmth. In the dining room, he stopped. The blue honeymoon plates were stacked neatly in the cabinet. He remembered the anniversary dinner she must have cooked. He opened the refrigerator and found nothing. Of course not, weeks had passed. But in his mind, he saw it. Candles. Cold food. Clara sitting alone. Waiting for a man who had already taught her not to expect him. Daniel gripped the counter. The guilt did not arrive like lightning. It settled like dust, coating everything. A week later, Daniel drove to Sophie's house. She opened the door, saw him, and immediately crossed her arms. "No. I need to know if she's okay." "She's better." The answer struck him harder than anger would have. "Better?" "Yes." He swallowed, "Without me." Sophie looked at him for a long moment. "You really didn't think that was possible, did you?" Daniel had no answer. Sophie stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind her. "She loved you, Daniel, do you understand that? Not your money, not your house. She defended you for years. Every time I told her she deserved more, she said you were tired, grieving, stressed, trying. She protected your image even when you were breaking her heart." Daniel looked down. "I didn't know it was that bad." Sophie's voice hardened, "Because you didn't ask." He flinched. "I want to fix it," he said. Sophie laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You want to fix it now because the house is quiet." "That's not fair." "No, Daniel. What wasn't fair was Clara begging for crumbs of attention in a marriage where she gave you the whole table." He closed his eyes. Sophie's voice softened just a little. "She doesn't need a grand gesture. She doesn't need roses from your assistant. She needs peace. If you love her at all, give her that." "Can you tell her I came?" "No." And Sophie. No, if Clara wants to speak to you, she will. Until then, respect the only boundary she has ever been brave enough to draw. Daniel drove home, feeling like the road had no end. Winter came early that year. In Lake Marin, frost silvered the grass outside Clara's cottage. She bought a red scarf from the town market and wore it every morning. She learned which coffee shop had the best cinnamon rolls. She joined a small business group. She laughed more. Sometimes grief still found her. It came while folding laundry, while hearing a song Daniel used to hum, while waking from dreams where he loved her again. But she no longer mistook grief for a sign she should go back. Missing someone did not mean they were good for you. Loving someone did not mean you had to disappear for them. By December, Clara had 3 steady clients and a waiting list. The biggest opportunity came from a woman named Nora Whitfield, owner of an old theater downtown that had been closed for 12 years. Nora wanted to restore it into a community art space. It needs beauty, Nora told Clara during their first walkthrough, but not the kind that scares people away. I want kids, seniors, musicians, tired mothers, first dates, everybody. I want them to walk in and feel like the town saved a seat for them. Clara looked up at the cracked ceiling, the dusty stage, the rows of worn velvet seats. Her heart stirred. This place doesn't need to become something else, she said. It needs to remember what it was. Nora smiled. You're hired. The theater became Clara's life for the next 2 months. She worked with painters, carpenters, electricians, and volunteers. She chose deep, warm tones, restored old brass fixtures, and created a lobby filled with comfortable seating. She found local artists to contribute framed pieces. She even saved a section of the original ticket booth, polishing the glass until it shone. The reopening was scheduled for Valentine's weekend. Clara did not think about the irony. Not much. Meanwhile, Daniel tried therapy because Marcy left a brochure on his desk and said, "You can fire me if you want, but you need this." He did not fire her. At his first session, he sat across from Dr. Lewis, a man with patient eyes, and said, "My wife left me." Dr. Lewis asked why. Daniel began with work, stress, the company, his father's death. Dr. Lewis listened. Then he asked, "And what does Clara say is the reason?" Daniel's throat tightened. She said she was unseen. Dr. Lewis nodded. Was she? Daniel wanted to defend himself. Instead, he looked at his hands. And yes, it was the first honest word he had spoken about his marriage in years. Therapy did not transform him overnight. Nothing real does. But it forced him to sit with questions he had avoided. Why had he turned grief into distance? Why had he treated love as something that could wait forever? Why did he believe providing money excused the absence of tenderness? Why had he become so afraid of needing anyone that he punished the one person who wanted to stand beside him? Some answers hurt. He had learned from his father that work was proof of worth. He had learned from his mother that emotions were weakness. He had learned from loss that loving deeply meant risking unbearable pain. So he built walls. And Clara, patient Clara, kept knocking until her knuckles bled. Daniel had not opened the door. Now he stood alone behind it. In January, Elaine Bennett invited Daniel to dinner. His mother lived in a large brick house with stiff furniture and perfect silverware. She had never fully approved of Clara, not because Clara was unkind, because Clara made Daniel softer, and Elaine had always believed softness was dangerous. During dinner, Elaine said, "I heard Clara is working in Lake Marin." Daniel looked up. From who? People talk. He set down his fork. Elaine continued, "I suppose she wanted independence. Women get ideas from friends." Daniel's expression went cold. Don't. Elaine blinked, "Excuse me. Don't talk about her like that." His mother's mouth tightened. "I'm only saying she should have considered what leaving would do to your reputation." Daniel laughed bitterly. My reputation? You are a Bennett. No, Daniel said quietly. I am a man whose wife left because I treated her like furniture. Elaine's face flushed. That is vulgar. It is true. You worked hard. So did she. She lived comfortably. She lived alone. Elaine looked away first. Daniel stood. I spent years becoming exactly what you and Dad praised me for. Controlled, busy, untouchable, and I lost the only person who loved me when I wasn't any of those things. His mother said nothing. Daniel left before dessert. It was the first time in his life he had defended Clara to Elaine. And Clara was not there to hear it. Maybe that was why it mattered. Because it was not performance. It was truth. The first time Daniel saw Clara again, it was accidental. At least Clara believed it was. The theater reopening had drawn half the county. Strings of warm lights framed the entrance. A local jazz trio played near the stage. People wandered through the restored lobby, touching the polished wood and admiring the artwork. Clara wore a dark green dress and her grandmother's necklace. Her hair was pinned loosely, a few curls falling near her face. She looked nervous and radiant. Nora raised a glass during the opening speech and said, "This theater was given back its soul by Clara Hayes." Applause filled the room. Clara flushed, smiled, and lowered her eyes. Near the back, Daniel stood frozen. He had come because Marcy told him the reopening was public. He told himself he only wanted to see her work, to know she was okay, to stand at the edge of a room and leave unnoticed. But when he saw her, his chest ached. Not because she looked beautiful, though she did. Because she looked alive. There was color in her face, light in her eyes. People approached her with warmth and respect. She laughed with ease. Daniel realized, with painful clarity, that he had not seen her like this in years. Or worse. Maybe he had not looked. Clara saw him 20 minutes later. She turned from a conversation with the mayor and found him standing near the old ticket booth. For a second, the room seemed to fall away. Daniel looked thinner, tired. His suit was simple, not one of the sharp armor-like ones he wore to business events. His eyes were fixed on her with an expression she did not recognize at first. Regret. Clara's hand tightened around her glass. Nora noticed, "Are you all right?" "Yes," Clara said. But her voice was softer than she intended. Daniel took one step forward, then stopped, as if afraid to come closer without permission. Clara could have walked away. Part of her wanted to. Instead, she excused herself and approached him. "Daniel." He swallowed. "Clara." There was a time when hearing him say her name would have undone her. Now it only opened an old door she had learned not to walk through. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I came to see your work." She glanced around. "You saw it." "It's beautiful." "Thank you." A silence fell. But this silence was different. Before, Daniel's silence had dismissed her. Now it seemed full of words he did not know how to earn the right to say. He looked at her carefully. "You look well." "I am." The answer landed between them. Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm glad." And strangely, Clara believed him. He did not say, "I miss you." He did not ask her to come home. He did not touch her. He only said, "I'm sorry." Clara looked at him. He continued, voice low. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it may be too late, but I need to say it without excuses. I ignored you. I made you lonely. I let you carry a marriage I stopped showing up for. You tried to reach me, and I made you feel unreasonable for needing love. I am sorry, Clara." Her throat tightened. For 7 years, she had dreamed of this. Daniel standing in front of her, finally understanding. But dreams are dangerous because they never include the cost of waiting. She breathed carefully. "Thank you for saying that." Pain flickered across his face. That was all she offered. Not forgiveness. Not hope. Just acknowledgement. Daniel nodded again. I won't keep you. He started to turn. Clara surprised herself by saying, Are you all right? He looked back. For a moment the old Daniel appeared, vulnerable, human, young beneath all that control. No, he said softly, but I'm learning to be honest about that. Then he left. Clara stood still long after the door closed behind him. Sophie found her near the ticket booth. You okay? Clara nodded, then shook her head, then laughed weakly. I don't know. Sophie touched her arm. He looked miserable. Clara looked toward the door. And yes. Does that make you happy? Clara thought about it. Once, maybe it would have. There had been nights she wanted him to feel even a fraction of what she felt. But now, seeing his pain did not heal hers. It only reminded her that love could wound everyone differently. No, she said, it just makes me sad. Sophie's expression softened. Sad doesn't mean wrong. I know. Do you? Clara looked around the theater at the lights, the people, the life she had built from the ruins. Yes, she whispered, I do. After the reopening, Daniel wrote Clara a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. He wrote it by hand because he remembered how much she believed in handwriting. It took him 3 nights. He did not ask her to return. He did not list promises like a business proposal. He told the truth. He wrote about his father's death, but not as an excuse. He wrote about fear, about pride, about the way he had confused being needed with being trapped, about the morning he found her gone and realized the silence in their home had always been hers too. He wrote about therapy. He wrote about Elaine. He wrote about finding her notes in his files. He wrote, I thought I was the one carrying everything, but you were carrying me. He wrote, you deserved a husband, not a shadow with a schedule. He wrote, I do not expect you to forgive me. I only wanted there to be one honest record of what I failed to say when it mattered. He mailed it to her lawyer because he did not know her address. Mara forwarded it. Clara received the letter on a snowy Tuesday afternoon. She sat at her kitchen table in the yellow kitchen and read it slowly. Then she read it again. She cried. Not because she wanted to go back. Because the apology was real. And real apologies are painful. They arrive carrying 2 griefs. The grief of what happened, and the grief of what might have been different if the truth had come sooner. Clara placed the letter in a drawer. Not with the sticky note. Some memories belonged in different rooms of the heart. Spring came to Lake Marin with rain, wildflowers, and new beginnings. Clara's business grew enough for her to hire an assistant, a sharp young designer named Mia, who loved bold colors, and arrived every morning with iced coffee. One afternoon, Mia watched Clara rearrange fabric samples for 10 minutes and said, You're nervous about something. Clara laughed, You're too observant. It's my gift. Clara looked at the calendar. Her divorce hearing was in 2 days. The separation had been calm, legally speaking. Daniel did not fight, he agreed to fair terms. He signed what needed signing. Through lawyers, he was respectful. Almost too respectful. Some part of Clara had expected him to resist, to demand, to make it harder. Instead, he gave her exactly what she asked for. Freedom. And freedom, she discovered, could still hurt. On the morning of the hearing, Clara wore a navy dress and the red scarf. Sophie drove her. The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish. Daniel was already there when they arrived. He stood when he saw her. Clara. Daniel. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he did not. The hearing itself was brief. A judge asked questions. Lawyers answered. Papers were reviewed. Names were spoken in formal tones. And then, just like that, the marriage that had once begun under an oak tree ended beneath fluorescent lights. Clara Bennett became Clara Hayes again. Afterward, she stood outside the courthouse while Sophie went to get the car. Daniel came down the steps behind her. Clara. She turned. He held an envelope. I found something while clearing out the house. The house had been sold 2 months earlier. Daniel said it was too large for one person. Clara had not asked if he meant the building or the memory. She took the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Their wedding day. Not the polished portrait from the album, but a candid shot. Clara was laughing, head tilted back. Daniel was looking at her instead of the camera, his face full of wonder. On the back, in his old handwriting, were the words, "This is the moment I knew I had everything." Clara's eyes filled. Daniel looked away, jaw tight. "I thought you should have it." She held the photo carefully. "Thank you." He nodded. "I sold the house. I heard. I couldn't live there." Clara looked at him then. He gave a small, sad smile. Turns out it was never the house that made it home. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel said, "I know I don't have the right to ask, but are you happy?" Clara looked beyond him at the courthouse lawn, where sunlight shone through new leaves. "I'm becoming happy." He absorbed that. Then he said, "Good." The word was rough but sincere. Sophie's car pulled up. Clara turned to go, then stopped. "Daniel." "Yes." "I forgive you." His face changed. Not relief exactly. Something deeper. Something that hurt. Clara continued, "But forgiveness doesn't mean returning. I need you to understand that." He nodded, eyes shining. "I do. I hope you forgive yourself too, not quickly, not cheaply, but someday." Daniel looked down. "I'm working on it." Clara got into the car. As Sophie drove away, Clara looked back once. Daniel stood on the courthouse steps, smaller somehow without the life they had built around him. But he was standing. And so was she. Two people who had loved each other. Two people who had failed each other in different ways. Two people finally telling the truth. Months passed. Clara's life became full. Not crowded full. There is a difference. Crowded is noise. Full is meaning. She worked hard, but not until she disappeared. She made friends who knew when she was pretending to be fine. She hosted small dinners in the cottage, where people squeezed around her second-hand table and laughed too loudly. She bought fresh flowers for herself every Friday. Not roses. Wildflowers. She took a pottery class and was terrible at it. Her first bowl leaned so badly Sophie called it emotionally complex. Clara kept it anyway. She began speaking at local design events about creating spaces that heal. Her talks were quiet and honest, nothing flashy. People came up afterward to tell her stories about homes they had survived, rooms they missed, kitchens where mothers once sang. Clara understood. A room could hold pain. A room could also release it. One evening in late August, almost a year after she left Daniel, Clara was invited to speak at a charity event for the Willow Creek Women's Shelter. She almost said no. Not because she did not care. Because the event was in Willow Creek, her old town. Because Daniel's company was listed as one of the sponsors. Because healing did not mean never being afraid. But Nora told her, sometimes the room you're scared to enter is the one that proves you're free. So Clara went. The event was held in a renovated hotel ballroom, soft gold lights, round tables, white linens, a stage at the front. Clara arrived early, checked her notes, and tried not to scan the room. Then she heard his voice. Not behind her. On stage. Daniel stood at the podium. Clara froze near the entrance. He wore a dark suit, but something about him was different, less polished, more present. He was speaking to the crowd, not performing for it. "My company is honored to support the shelter's expansion," he said, but I want to be clear about something. Buildings matter, funding matters, but none of it matters if people inside those walls do not feel seen. Clara's breath caught. Daniel continued. I spent too much of my life believing providing was the same as caring. It is not. Care requires attention. It requires humility. It requires noticing when someone is becoming quiet because they have stopped believing anyone will answer. The room was silent. Daniel glanced down at his notes, then set them aside. The shelter's new family rooms were designed by Clara Hayes. Many of you know her work. She understands something I had to learn too late. A space can tell a person they matter, that they are safe, that they are not invisible. Clara stood in the back, unable to move. Daniel did not look for her. He did not know she was there. That made the words heavier. He was not speaking to win her. He was speaking because he believed it. For anyone here tonight who has ever felt unseen, Daniel said, I hope this shelter becomes a place where you are met with dignity. And for anyone who has failed to see someone they loved, I hope you learn before silence costs you what you cannot replace. He stepped back. Applause rose slowly, then warmly. Clara walked into the hallway before anyone could notice her tears. A few minutes later, Daniel found her there. He stopped several feet away. I didn't know you were here. I know. I wasn't trying to. I know. He nodded. Clara wiped her cheek. That was a good speech. Thank you. You meant it. And yes. She looked at him then. Really looked. The man before her was not the Daniel she had married. He was not the Daniel who ignored her. He was someone still becoming. So was she. I'm proud of you, Clara said. Daniel's eyes filled instantly. He looked away, breathing through it. Those 4 words seemed to undo him more than anger ever had. Thank you, he whispered. A silence settled between them. But it was no longer empty. It was gentle. Clara said, I should go back in. Of course. She took a step, then paused. Daniel. He looked at her. I don't regret leaving. Pain crossed his face, but he nodded. I know. But I also don't regret loving you. For a moment, he could not speak. Then he said, neither do I. Clara returned to the ballroom. Daniel stayed in the hallway a little longer. And for once, neither of them chased what had already ended. A year later, Clara stood on the porch of her cottage at sunrise. The lake was still, mist hovered over the water, the world looked soft around the edges. In her hands was the old cookbook. She had decided that morning to make lemon pancakes, a recipe her mother used to make when Clara was a child. As she opened the book, the sticky note slipped out again. I love you more than coffee, but please don't make me prove it. Clara held it for a long time. The paper was faded now. The joke still made her smile. But it no longer hurt the same way. That was how she knew she had healed. Not because the memory disappeared. Because it no longer owned her. She carried the note inside and placed it in a small wooden box with other pieces of her life. The wedding photo. Daniel's apology letter. A theater program. A wildflower pressed between pages. Not a shrine. Not a wound. A record. Proof that love had existed. Proof that loss had not destroyed her. Proof that walking away had not been the end of her story. It had been the beginning of hearing her own voice again. Later that afternoon, Clara visited the Willow Creek shelter to check the final room installations. Children's drawings covered one wall. A soft couch sat beneath a window. There were lamps instead of harsh ceiling lights, books on low shelves, and a mural of a sunrise painted by local volunteers. A woman staying at the shelter stood in the doorway with her arms wrapped around herself. It feels peaceful, she said. Clara smiled. That was the goal. The woman glanced around. I forgot rooms could feel like this. Clara understood more than she could say. Sometimes, she said gently, we just need one place that reminds us we're still here. The woman nodded, eyes wet. As Clara left the shelter, she saw Daniel across the parking lot speaking with a contractor. He noticed her and lifted a hand in greeting. She lifted hers back. No ache. No anger. Just peace. That evening, Clara drove home with the windows down. The sky was pink and gold, and the radio played an old love song she had not heard in years. Once, it would have made her cry. Now she sang along. Badly. Loudly. Freely. When she reached the cottage, she parked beneath the pine trees and carried her bag inside. The rooms welcomed her. Yellow kitchen. Blue curtains. Crooked pottery bowl on the shelf. Wildflowers on the table. A design sketch drying near the window. The kettle waiting on the stove. Nothing grand. Everything hers. Clara made tea and stepped onto the porch as evening settled over the lake. Across the water, lights appeared one by one in other homes. People cooking dinner. People arguing gently. People laughing. People learning how to love better or learning when to leave. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm mug and thought about the girl under the oak tree, the young wife waiting at the table, the woman driving away in the rain, and the person standing here now. She loved them all, even the one who stayed too long. Especially her, because that woman had survived on hope until courage arrived. A soft breeze moved through the trees. For years, Clara had waited for Daniel to notice her. Now she noticed herself. The way her shoulders no longer curved inward. The way her breath came easier. The way silence felt peaceful instead of punishing. The way her life, once built around someone else's absence, had become full of her own presence. Some love stories end with two people finding their way back to each other. But some love stories end with a woman finding her way back to herself. And that is not a smaller ending. That is not a sadder ending. Sometimes it is the bravest ending of all. Because Clara Bennett had spent 7 years being ignored. Then one day she walked away. And yes, Daniel finally noticed. But by then, Clara had noticed something too. She noticed the door. She noticed the road. She noticed the strength in her own hands. She noticed that her heart, though bruised and tired, was still beating for her. And when the porch light came on that night, glowing softly behind the blue curtains of a little cottage by the lake, Clara did not leave it burning for a man who might come home late. She left it on because she liked the way it looked. Warm. Steady. Alive. Just like her.